I've interviewed a lot of people in prison. Most people will tell you when they're behind bars that they're not guilty, even that they're innocent. What makes you different?
It's true. It's absolutely true. Innocent is no part in it, no plan in it, didn't know it was happening, didn't know it was gonna happen, and didn't want it to happen. That is me. I am 100% innocent of Michelle's murder.
On the 24th of February, 1987, the body of a woman named Michelle was found lifeless in a canal in Lakeland, Florida. The young woman, who was 18 at the time, had been brutally murdered with multiple stab wounds. This tragic discovery triggered an investigation that quickly focused on her husband, Leo Schofield, who was convicted of the murder and spent 35 years in prison before his guilt was seriously questioned. Interestingly, thanks to the push from the media and advancements in new investigative technologies, what would soon be uncovered was about to cast doubt on the justice system's work and whether this man was truly the perpetrator. And if this man is not the culprit, who is really responsible for this crime? Stay until the end to learn about this case, where it took many years for the truth to finally come to light. Michelle and Leo Schofield had been married for only a year before her death. According to witnesses, the couple were deeply in love, but they also suffered from constant arguments due to jealousy and financial difficulties. It's important to note that they had married very young. Michelle had disappeared on the night of the 24th of February after leaving her home in the car they shared.
How much time needs to go by before you begin to start getting panicky?
Polk County Sheriff's Office, Operator 53. Can I help you?
Yes, I need to talk to somebody about finding my wife.
Hours later, the vehicle was found abandoned in an industrial area, which sparked a search that ended with the discovery of her body. From the very beginning, the eyes of justice turned towards Leo Schofield, who was considered the prime suspect. His volatile relationship with Michelle, combined with the lack of a solid alibi and statements from several witnesses who claimed to have heard screams coming from the couple's home on the night of the crime, placed him at the center of the investigation. Furthermore, the fact that Michelle's car was found near Leo's house only increased suspicion against him. The investigation also relied on the absence of clear physical evidence pointing to another suspect. Although Leo had maintained his innocence from the outset, the authorities found enough circumstantial evidence to press charges against him. One of the most controversial aspects was the testimony of a neighbor who claimed to have seen Leo near the place where the abandoned car was found, saying that he had removed the vehicle's carpets to clean them. The prosecution used this testimony, along with the couple's history of marital problems, to build a case that led to Leo's conviction in 1989. During the trial, Leo Schofield's defense argued that there was no conclusive evidence linking him to the murder, but the jury, swayed by the emotional testimony of the witnesses and the circumstances surrounding the case, eventually found him guilty. Leo Schofield was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. From that moment, his life changed dramatically, and his name became forever associated with the brutal murder of his wife. For Michelle's family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, believing that the guilty party had been punished. But for Leo, it was only the beginning of a battle to prove his innocence. Just quickly, if you're enjoying this video so far and want more true crime cases from the Sunshine State, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Thank you. For decades, Leo Schofield remained steadfast in his position, asserting that he had not murdered his wife and that the real culprit was still at large. Despite his repeated attempts to appeal the sentence, the courts always upheld their original decision. The lack of new evidence or witnesses to exonerate him made any attempt to revisit the case difficult. In the years following Leo Schofield's conviction, forensic techniques advanced significantly, offering new tools to solve old crimes. Evidence such as DNA analysis, which was not as developed in the 1980s, began to play a crucial role in the review of wrongful convictions. In many cases, modern technology allowed individuals convicted on circumstantial evidence to be exonerated, opening the door for Leo Schofield to also have a new opportunity to prove his innocence. However, it would take many years and the tireless efforts of a group of advocates for wrongfully convicted individuals for Schofield's case to gain traction in the media and among legal professionals. This group not only focused on questioning the validity of the evidence presented against him, but also on seeking new witnesses or evidence that could provide a different version of the events. The most dramatic turn in Leo Schofield's case occurred when, after decades of investigation and failed appeals, a new name emerged: Jeremy Scott. This man, who had been convicted of other violent crimes around the same time, was identified as a potential suspect in Michelle Schofield's death. Further investigation revealed that Scott had a history of violent behavior and was free at the time Michelle was murdered. What caught the attention of Leo's defenders was that the fingerprints found in Michelle's car, which did not match Leo's, belonged to Jeremy Scott. Despite this new evidence, local authorities initially resisted reopening the case, arguing that the evidence presented at the original trial remained valid. However, Leo Schofield's lawyers eventually succeeded in bringing the case before an appeals court, where they argued that Leo's conviction was based on circumstantial evidence and that the real killer could be Jeremy Scott. Scott's testimony, in which he admitted to his involvement in several violent crimes but denied killing Michelle, was key in the case review. Although Scott never confessed to the murder, the new evidence raised serious doubts about Leo's guilt. With the new evidence on the table, Leo's defenders began working tirelessly to secure his release. For years, they appealed to various courts, presenting forensic reports that questioned the validity of the evidence used in the original trial. However, the judicial system was slow to accept these new arguments. Finally, in 2023, after 35 years in prison, Leo Schofield was conditionally released while his case continued to be reviewed. The decision was met with joy by his supporters and skepticism from those who still believed in his guilt. Despite his release, the process of fully clearing his name is not yet complete, and Leo remains officially a convict. With Leo Schofield's release in 2023, after having spent more than 3 decades in prison, his case continues to draw interest from activists and the media. His release was not without conditions. Technically, he remains a convict on parole, as his name has not been fully cleared of the original conviction for the murder of his wife, Michelle Schofield. The lawyers working on his case, as well as organizations dedicated to exonerating wrongfully convicted individuals, are determined to achieve a full exoneration for Leo. Despite his release, the legal challenges he faces to reach this goal remain formidable. The judicial system in the United States is notoriously reluctant to admit errors, and although the evidence pointing to Jeremy Scott as a possible suspect is strong, the authorities have yet to conclusively close the case in his favor. Jeremy Scott is a violent criminal with a history of brutal acts, including robbery and murder. In 1988, just 1 year after Michelle Schofield's murder, Scott was convicted of killing a woman during a robbery. The similarities between Scott's modus operandi and the murder of Michelle Schofield became impossible for investigators reviewing Leo's case to ignore. This was further compounded by the revelation that the fingerprints found in Michelle's car matched those of Scott. However, Jeremy Scott himself has given conflicting accounts of his involvement in the crime. On some occasions, he has confessed to being involved in Michelle's murder, while at other times, he has vehemently denied any involvement. This has created confusion and complicated the legal process for Leo Schofield's lawyers. The issue lies in the fact that confessions without additional evidence are not always enough to overturn a conviction. Despite this, the new evidence has led several judges to seriously consider that Leo Schofield may not be guilty of the crime. Nevertheless, due to the complex nature of the appeals process in murder cases, the road to complete exoneration is long and difficult. Leo Schofield's case has captured the attention of several organizations dedicated to defending wrongfully convicted individuals, such as the Innocence Project, one of the most influential in this field. This group has been instrumental in reviewing numerous cases through the use of modern technology, such as DNA analysis and the gathering of new forensic evidence. Moreover, the media has been crucial in keeping public attention on the case. Documentaries, podcasts, and investigative articles have helped more people learn about the details of Leo Schofield's case and question the validity of his conviction. In particular, a documentary produced by a local television channel was key in exposing the inconsistencies in the original trial and the lack of strong evidence against him. These reports have also highlighted the systemic failures within the U.S. judicial system, where circumstantial evidence, unreliable witness testimony, or personal biases often lead to the conviction of innocent people. In this context, Schofield's case has become an example of why a more rigorous and scientific approach to justice is necessary. One of the key elements that has benefited Leo Schofield's case is the advancement of technology in forensic evidence analysis. In the 1980s, when Michelle Schofield was murdered, the techniques for examining physical evidence were rudimentary compared to today's standards. For instance, the fingerprints found at the crime scene were analyzed, but there wasn't a database as advanced as the one we have now. Progress in forensic technology has allowed for more precise testing, such as DNA analysis, which in many cases has led to the exoneration of wrongfully convicted individuals. Although no DNA traces were found in Michelle Schofield's case that could be analyzed, the fingerprints were re-evaluated using more modern techniques, leading to the identification of Jeremy Scott as a potential suspect. This advancement was a decisive factor in enabling Leo Schofield's case to be reviewed. Moreover, tools like artificial intelligence and the creation of more comprehensive databases have helped solve cold cases and open new lines of investigation that would have been impossible in the past. Despite the advancements in the case and Leo Schofield's conditional release, the process of achieving full exoneration remains complex. The U.S. justice system requires a standard of compelling evidence to overturn a conviction, which means Schofield's lawyers must not only prove Leo's innocence, but also identify the real culprit with certainty. So far, although Jeremy Scott's fingerprints were found in Michelle's car, he has not been formally charged with the murder due to a lack of additional evidence directly linking him to the crime. This leaves Leo Schofield in a legally ambiguous situation, as while the evidence suggests he did not kill his wife, the authorities have yet to drop the charges against him. Spending 35 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit leaves deep scars, not just on the person convicted, but also on their loved ones. Leo Schofield has spoken publicly about the impact his imprisonment had on his mental and emotional health.
I'm missing 36 years worth of moments. I'm not going to miss another 36 years.
Over the years, he faced despair, frustration, and the feeling of being abandoned by the justice system. During his time in prison, Leo also lost important family and social relationships. His parents passed away while he was incarcerated, and many of his friends and relatives distanced themselves, some convinced of his guilt, while others couldn't bear the emotional burden of the process. The sense of helplessness was a constant companion throughout his imprisonment, but his steadfast belief that he would one day prove his innocence kept him going. Leo's release has not erased the pain of all those years, but it has given him a new opportunity to rebuild his life. However, like many exonerated individuals, he faces challenges in adjusting to a society that has changed dramatically since he was imprisoned in 1987. Technology, culture, and social norms have advanced at a rapid pace, and for Leo, adapting has been both a blessing and a struggle. For years, Schofield's release date had been set for the 24th of June, 2023, but during a parole hearing, the state's Offender Review Commission, consisting of 3 members, agreed that he should spend a year in a transitional program before his parole could be considered. Schofield successfully completed that program at the Everglades Reentry Center in Miami, according to comments made during the hearing in Tallahassee, and the commission's investigators recommended his release. The commission voted unanimously to release him. Once released, he will be moved to a halfway house, and the commission will monitor him monthly. His parole could be revoked if he violates its terms, which include participating in a community outreach program followed by an 18-month curfew, mental health assessments, and any recommended treatment. He will be prohibited from contacting the victim's family and will have to pay restitution, the amount of which is yet to be determined. What we do know is that he remarried a woman named Chrissy, earned a degree in theology, and led Bible studies in prison. Far from a happy ending, but at least he managed to prove his innocence and clear his name, something that seemed impossible to achieve just a few years ago. Don't forget to leave your comment and thoughts on this case. Do you remember any similar cases where someone was wrongfully imprisoned for many years? Thank you for staying until the end, until the next video.